Good evening and welcome to the San Bruno City Council regular meeting of October the 10th, 2023. Meeting has been called to order. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Alvarez?
Here.
Councilmember Marty Medina?
Here.
Councilmember Salazar?
Here.
Vice Mayor Hamilton?
Here.
Mayor Rico Medina?
Here. If you would all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance this evening. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I want to make a note that due to unforeseen emergency item 7A, which is review and provide direction on the Crestmoor MultiUse, is being tentatively moved to the next regular city council meeting, which is set for October the 24th, 2023. Sorry for anyone's inconvenience. Next, we'll move on to item 4, which is public comments for items not on the agenda.
I have no speaker cards.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to item 5, announcements and presentations. We have a few. The first one is item A, join the Fire Station 51, which is located at 555 El Camino Real, for their annual open house on Saturday, October the 14th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Next item, B, the city has partnered with Relocations again for the 2 free community events. Don't forget to mark your calendar, which it's this Saturday for the Fall Community Drop-Off Day and the Fall Compost Giveaway. So the Community Drop-Off Day is again this Saturday from 8 to 11 at 975 Sneath Lane in San Bruno. The Fall Compost Giveaway is October 14th and 15th, located at 500 First Avenue, San Bruno, which is Lions Field. Item C, it is that time of year for the cold winter, as we know, as we have a little bit of rain now. Join the 27th annual coat drive and donate your new or gently used clean coats. Any sizes are accepted. Collections through now to November the 1st, 2023 at various sites, including the San Bruno City Hall, police station, fire station, library. For more information, please contact Relocations of San Bruno at 650-583-8536. Item D, we're going to issue 3 proclamations. The first one is the proclamation declaring October as National Filipino American Heritage Month in San Bruno. And the city clerk and I went back and looked, and we believe this will be the first one that the city has offered recognizing this. I'm happy to do so. And I'll just read some of the whereases. Whereas after years of advocacy by individuals and organizations in 2009, the United States Congress recognized the contributions and sacrifices made by the Filipino community and recognized October as Filipino American History Month. Whereas in the month of October, we honor the history, pursuits, accomplishments, and legacy of Filipinos in the United States with Filipino American History Month. And whereas immigrants from the Philippines and their families truly have enriched our nation, state, and city through their work and contributions in agriculture, in their service in the armed forces, in their offerings, skills, and expertise as engineers, scientists, entrepreneurs, accountants, teachers, lawyers, nurses, and doctors, and their participation in public offices, civic affairs, and community activities. And whereas diversity represents one of our greatest strengths, and by recognizing the contributions and accomplishments of the Filipino American men and women, our city celebrates the importance of inclusion to build a brighter future for our community. Now, therefore, I, Rico E. Medina, Mayor of the City of San Bruno, do hereby proclaim October as National Filipino American History Month and encourage all to recognize the riches of the Filipino American experience and honor the contributions of the Filipino Americans. Signed by myself. The next proclamation is going to be Fire Prevention Week in the City of San Bruno. This will be declaring October the 8th through the 14th as Fire Prevention Week in San Bruno. And I'll say a few whereases, then we'll hear from the fire marshal. Whereas 2 of every 5 home fires start in the kitchen, with 31% of these fires resulting from unattended cooking. And whereas more than half of reported non-fatal home cooking fires injuries occurred when the victims tried to fight the fire themselves. And whereas children under 5 face a higher risk of non-fire burns associated with cooking than being burned in a cooking fire. And whereas residents who have planned and practiced a home fire escape plan and more prepared and will therefore be more likely to survive a fire. And whereas the 2023 Fire Prevention Week theme, Cooking Safety Starts With You. Pay attention to fire prevention effectively serves to remind us to stay alert and use caution when cooking to reduce the risk of kitchen fires. Now, therefore, I, Rico E. Medina, Mayor of the City of San Bruno, do hereby proclaim October the 8th through the 14th, 2023, as Fire Prevention Week, and urge the community to check their kitchens for fire extinguishers and use safe cooking practices during Fire Prevention Week 2023 and support the many public safety activities and efforts of the fire and emergency services. And of course, also, it's in coordination this week with Fire Prevention Week, which is a long-standing history in this community. So with that, I would bring up the fire marshal.
Move it up a little bit. Honorable Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the City Council, esteemed guests online, since we don't have anybody here right now, and fellow community members, I am pleased to address you tonight and highlight the significance of Fire Prevention Week and to proudly announce the 69th annual Fire Poster Contest in San Bruno's elementary schools, as well as our open house, as the Mayor mentioned earlier. Fire Prevention Week, which occurs annually this October 8th through the 14th, is a time when our community comes together to emphasize the importance of fire safety and prevention. It is an opportunity for us to reflect on the devastating impacts of fire and the collective responsibility we bear to ensuring the safety of our residents. This year, as we observe the 69th anniversary of our fire poster contest in our local elementary schools, we reaffirm our commitment to instilling the fire safety awareness from a young age. The contest fosters creativity amongst our youth, but also empowers them with the knowledge and skills to prevent fires. Our annual fire poster contest continues to make meaningful differences in our community, and together we can promote a culture of prevention and ensure the safety and well-being of our beloved San Bruno. Please join us this Saturday, October 14th, for our annual open house. The annual open house is not only an occasion for us to showcase our commitment to your safety, but also a chance for you to learn, ask questions, and experience firsthand the work our brave men and women in uniform do. We hope you enjoy the day and leave with a deeper appreciation for the services our fire department provides to our community. The hours of this Saturday are from 10 to 2, like the Mayor mentioned a little bit ago. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, and thank you for your efforts and work. With that, we'll move on to item F, issue proclamation declaring October 23rd through the 31st, 2023 as Red Ribbon Week in San Bruno, which is also a long-standing tradition. I'll read a couple of the whereases, and I will bring forward the police chief. Whereas Red Ribbon Week offers citizens the opportunity to demonstrate their commitment to drug-free lifestyles, and whereas Red Ribbon Week will be celebrated in communities across the nation on October 23rd, 2023 through October 31st, 2023. And whereas all of those who reside, work, and frequent the city of San Bruno are encouraged to demonstrate their commitment to healthy, drug-free lifestyles by wearing red wristbands commencing Red Ribbon Week. And whereas the San Bruno community further commits to contributing to the success of Red Ribbon Week, now therefore I, Rico E. Medina, Mayor of the City of San Bruno, do hereby proclaim October the 23rd through the 31st, 2023 as Red Ribbon Week, and encourage all to participate in drug prevention education activities, not only during Red Ribbon Week, but also throughout the year, making a visible statement that we are strongly committed to a drug-free lifestyle. And then
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Tonight, I once again have the pleasure of accepting this proclamation designating Red Ribbon Week in San Bruno. on behalf of the members of the police department. Red Ribbon Week is a nationwide initiative aimed at educating youth and encouraging a drug-free lifestyle through drug prevention activities. It's important to note that this initiative began in response to the torture and killing of a DEA agent, Enrique Kiki Camarena, by a Mexican drug cartel in 1985. Kiki's family and his friends took to wearing red badges of satin to honor his sacrifice, and this later grew into people all over the country wearing red ribbons to demonstrate their commitment to a drug-free lifestyle. We have recognized Red Ribbon Week here in San Bruno for many years, with the police department distributing red wristbands to students and other community members to demonstrate our solidarity in reducing the impact that drugs have in our city and on our families. With that, and in honor of Agent Camarena, I'm happy to accept this proclamation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief. And again, thank you to both our public safety departments. And obviously, it sounds like Saturday for those who feel there's nothing to do in San Bruno. There's quite a bit to do. Also, there are no members of the public that wish to speak on the announcements or presentations. So we'll move on to consent calendar. All items are considered routine or implemented in earlier council action and may be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion unless requested. There will be one single time for public comment, period, for all items in this section, unless a council member requests to pull an item for a separate vote. We have items 6A through 6G. Are there any items for a separate vote? Seeing none. Items for discussion or comments? Councilmember Medina.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 6E as in elephant and 6F as in frog.
Okay, thank you. Well, let's start with 6E. Consider adoption of a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement with Yost for design services in the amount not to exceed $1,559,271 for the Avenues 2-3 Sewer and Water Main Replacement Project and Avenues 3-2 Sewer and Water Main Replacement Project. And Director Lee, as you give that, can you quantify, I mean, obviously we all know where that is, but can you quantify too where those areas are for the public when they're hearing the 3-2, that, if you know what I'm trying to say? Please, go ahead, Director.
Good evening, Mayor. Matt Lee, Public Works Director for the City of San Bruno. So the Avenues projects are out in the Avenues, and so that would be the east side of town, east of El Camino Real, in specific areas. If you look at the agenda packet in attachment 2, it'll highlight the various different zones. I know it could be confusing to a new person, but these zones were designated as part of our previous work plan, and so we've been kind of systematically working through these zones to ensure we replace both water and sewer lines in the area, and then coupled with paving at the end.
Thank you. Councilman Medina.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Director Lee. I did submit a number of questions. They are posted on the city website. And I typically pull these larger projects just to help inform our community, to our customers, that these projects don't come very easily, and they come with these costs for design and for construction costs. And staff was able to answer all of the questions I submitted. I just wanted to make sure that we were going to acknowledge that over the last 5 years, we've our design costs are $2.6 million, and the sewer and water construction cost for these 5 projects, was $36 million. A number of the neighborhoods on the east side have benefited from brand new water, brand new sewer, brand new streets, brand new curb ramps, and sidewalk repair. So I know our community is concerned about water rates and sewer rates, but I wanted to make sure that your efforts were acknowledged and that it's expensive to maintain and replace your water infrastructure. We have a very old town, especially in some parts, and at some point we need to replace everything. And these costs will be ongoing. They will continue to be going up, and we have to pay for them. We can't stop fixing things because we will just be kicking the can down the road, and we're going to be leaving the costs for a more expensive replacement down the future. So just wanted to thank you for all the questions that you provided, and acknowledge all that hard work for you and your staff.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lee. Any other questions or comments from colleagues on that item? Okay, let's go to item F, consider adoption of a resolution approving the design, authorizing the city manager to execute a construction contract. How do you spell that? Spesto? Spesetto. Engineering, Inc. for the Oak Avenue and Crystal Springs Road intersection improvement project in an amount not to exceed $744,288.50. Director Lee, you're back. And we'll hear from you, or do you want to have Councilmember Medina go first?
Through the chair, I'll defer to Councilmember.
Well, there you go.
You know, that was so easily done.
Yes.
So once again, this is a significant project that we're getting ready to deliver, and putting a signalized intersection there at Oak leading into our new and improved city park. I mean, it's really significant, and so it's something that, one, shows that we're continue working on improving our city, and two is that the progress that we're making and the traffic impacts that are going to come along with providing the best pool and recreation aquatic center on the peninsula. So I really wanted to, again, to thank you for this effort, because it's something very significant, and we have to acknowledge all that as we're continuing to work to improve our city. If you wanted to add anything else, the construction times and the delays that are going to come with construction. I mean, it goes hand in hand. So if you can provide any additional information on that, when we're going to start, scheduled for finish, and all that other good stuff, that definitely would be appreciated. So thank you and your staff.
And also, just so it's on, my understanding is that it's a requirement. Yeah, so we're being required to do this, but go ahead, Director Lee.
Through the chair, Councilmember Medina is correct, and Mayor Medina, you are too. The intersection that we are installing at Oak and Crystal Springs is part of a mitigation measure effort as part of the construction of the RAC, because we are constructing a large facility that's larger than what was previously planned and originated there. We took a look at the traffic impacts, and it identified that, in 10 to 20 years out, the level of service at that intersection would go down with stop signs. So as part of the mitigation effort, it was for us to put a signalized intersection there to allow for more efficient flow through the intersection. So that's what we're installing. In terms of timelines, after this project is awarded tonight to the lowest bidder, we will move forward with a pre-construction meeting and have a more robust schedule on what the timelines would be. The intent for this intersection is to have it built and hopefully coincide with the opening of the RAC.
Thank you.
Colleagues, anything? Councilmember Alvarez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just wondering, does the city have a sign, since we're doing a lot of capital improvements, does the city have a sign of your tax dollar at work? Sign on the road?
Yes, so for every CIP project, we have the contractor is required to have a project sign itself to identify the project sign, and there's a bunch of other various requirements, dollar amount, who's funding it, who the council members are, things like that. But your tax dollars at work sign are definitely made available for Measure G funded projects. And so if you guys see a lot of them recently, they're part of the slurry seal effort. And so every time we're spending Measure G funds, we want to make sure that the community understands that that's coming. We do have a couple of repaving projects and reconstruction projects that are upcoming. So when the heavy paving comes in, heavy road reconstruction, you'll see a couple of those signs as well. They're a blue sign, blue and white, red check mark. So if you see that out there, that's what those signs are.
Thank you, Director Lee. Appreciate it. With that, There are no council comments on, I'm sorry, there's no public comments on consent. So with that, I bring it back to the board for action.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion Salazar, second Medina to approve consent, 6A through 6G. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Pass unanimously, 5-0. Now we'll move on to item 7, conduct of business.
Item 7B, consider adoption of a resolution rescinding resolution number 2013-11 and adopting a fund balance policy.
With that, we're going to bring forward the CFO. And you.
Sorry, apologize.
So it was there?
Yeah, it looks like a television remote control.
It's okay.
So thank you.
CFO, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. My name's Nick Pigueros. I'm the city's chief financial officer. And this evening, I'm pleased to bring before you consideration of a fund balance policy. The requested action is that the city council rescind our existing reserve policy, which has served as our fund balance policy for several years now, and then approve a fund balance policy that achieves a number of objectives we'll discuss here this evening. So the first item is, or that I want to touch on, is what is a fund balance policy. The policy is intended to achieve several objectives. First is the first. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Just to start again, the purpose of the fund balance policy is several fold to assist the city through prioritizing and working through both budget as well as everyday sort of funding objectives. Clearly, there is a short-term ability for the fund balance policy to provide short-term fiscal stability to smooth the impacts of emergencies as well as cyclical economic downturns. Example of cyclical economic downturns or turns are typically recessions, what we know as recessions. The pandemic was very much a cyclical economic downturn, and that's differentiated from a structural downturn, which is something that is represented more by way of inflation and the impacts that has on our budget. In addition, the fund balance policy helps guide our planning for long-term fiscal stability in the areas of investing one-time monies in areas such as in infrastructure, as well as paying down long-term liabilities such as unfunded pensions. And then finally, the purpose of the policy is to help guide staff in its ever ongoing effort to ensure that the city's financial practices comply with generally accepted accounting principles, also known as GAAP. So to help walk through the recommended changes, clearly one of the most significant aspects of the existing policy is that it's a reserve policy, and so I want to start there. We currently have reserves in several buckets, and the recommendation is to consolidate those reserves and provide more broad definitions that achieve the same objective. So the first recommendation is to create a contingency reserve. Currently, we have a general fund reserve, and we have an emergency disaster fund. The recommendation is to consolidate those. Our current target for the existing reserves is $4.5 million. We are recommending that the reserve be set at a percentage of general fund operating expenditures. This ensures that the reserve keeps pace with our expenditures as they grow. According to, or for fiscal year 2024, that would equate to about $6.5 million as the updated target. So we would see an increase in the target to reserve. Moving on, we're recommending the creation of a budget stabilization reserve. Currently, we have in our reserve policy a general fund reserve, which sets a target funding level at 25% of the general fund budget. It doesn't specify operating budget, which is approximately $16.25 million in fiscal year 2024. We're recommending that this reserve be renamed to the budget stabilization to achieve the same purposes as you review the general fund reserve. It truly is a budget stabilization reserve. And we're recommending a 20% of general fund operating expenditures, or approximately $13 million, as the target for fiscal year 2024. I would add on this particular point that they generally sort of best practice by way of reserves is that cities are recommended, or the recommendation is that cities hold about 2 months of cash available for in their reserves. 20% puts it at 3.5 months, so we would be well above the best practice recommendation. The final category, or the final reserve recommended, is our one-time revenue reserve. This replaces our current general capital / one-time revenue reserve, which has a current target of $5 million. We're proposing that this reserve be renamed. By the very nature of a one-time revenue reserve, the recommendation is that there not be a targeted balance, that in the event of an emergency or in the event of an economic downturn, we would have our contingency in our budget stabilization reserve. Should there be a desire to take unassigned fund balance and appropriate that to general capital purposes, that's completely within the City Council's discretion within the budget process. So there are a few other changes that we're recommending. The first is that the policy incorporate fund balance designations, and these are, again, this is implementing generally accepted accounting principles, which clarifies how we report fund balance on our financial statements. One of the more significant changes that we will bring back to the council at the next council meeting is a required reporting on informal interfund loans. So as part of our annual closing process, any funds other than the general fund that have a negative balance receive a loan, effectively, an informal loan from the general fund in order to cover those deficits. We'd like to ensure that the council is aware of those before we go into the budget cycle so that we can plan accordingly. And then finally, a discussion of how and under what circumstances unassigned fund balance would be used. Unassigned fund balance is effectively when our revenues exceed our expenditures on an operating basis. And then finally, the policy incorporates the fund definitions as they exist currently in our annual comprehensive financial report. That is important so that we have those documented and there's general understanding of what each fund is intended to do, or purpose. So next steps with City Council consideration of this policy, we will return on the 24th with a preliminary fiscal year 2022-23 year-end close. What that allows us to do is it gives us the opportunity to understand what is available to put into the reserves. Regardless of the action this evening, we will need to rebalance our reserves to reflect the available resources that we ended last fiscal year with. We'll also provide the interfund loans report. And then subsequent to that, we will provide the City Council with the first quarter report for this current fiscal year. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, CFO, for bringing this forward, and believe obviously it was due to come back to us. I'm not sure of the year, Councilmember Salazar may remember, but for history perspective, this is something a former city council, which myself and Councilmember Salazar still sit, that established this. Had never happened before, and we felt it was time. I don't know if it was 213 or 216, but one of there has been ringing a bell, but to bring it back forward is important. Also, the emergency disaster fund of the $3 million, my memory is correct, that was from the unfortunate disaster of the PG&E pipeline explosion, where $3 million was issued to the mayor then, Ruane, and myself as the vice mayor, $3 million to take care of immediately overtime for the city. And that was a decision that the council then made to say, let's put that $3 million aside and put it there for emergency situations, i.e. San Bruno Avenue, which was utilized. That's where those monies were utilized from. So I'm kind of understanding it coming together, but I think I just wanted to bring that historical perspective of how we got here and why. And then I'm going to open it with Councilmember Salazar.
I was reaching for the mic. Thank you for bringing this forward. Appreciate you jumping right in with both feet and stirring some things up. Definitely agree with the concept of getting us in alignment with GAP, because when we started putting these things together, I think it was kind of things just sort of fell into place, like the mayor was saying. We had some funds, and then we started saying, okay, let's hold these for certain things. And I definitely like the idea of doing the accounting where we know where things are happening, where there's surpluses, where there's negatives. If you've looked at what's going on with cable, you'll see that's probably a glaring example of where we really need to track those loans from the general fund to the enterprises. I don't know that they're happening anywhere else, but that's definitely a glaring example. Getting back to the combining of funds, that's the one area I did have an issue with, because when we've had these previous discussions, it's really been the council's intent to have money that's available to address acts of God versus acts of the economy, right? So we want to be able to, and those two could happen simultaneously. We could have a bad weather year combined with a bad economic cycle, and having those funds identified separately has been a benefit, and it definitely makes us a little more comfortable about being able to deal with those things. So combining those, I have a little bit of concern about that, especially if we're combining them at a it would be probably at a lower level than what we were funding before. So I want to make sure that we are covered for those things. And we've talked about other funds that we sort of hold, and we have equipment replacement fund. We talked about establishing a separate facilities fund to take care of major repairs on our facilities, and that hasn't happened. And so I'd like to see this sort of expanded to also cover some of those other things that we always get caught short on, whether it's a roof or an air conditioning system or something like that. If we're not actively planning for those things, we're not going to be ready when they hit, or when we need extra money to buy police cars, which we may hear about tonight.
Through the chair. Thank you for the history on the various reserves. It was shared with me, and I genuinely appreciate the creation of the reserve policy in 2013. It is a statement of both priorities of the community as well as a commitment to fiscal planning. I do want to sort of touch on the difference. So we're recommending combining the general fund reserve, which is really sort of a It's a fund that's available for one-time purposes under our current policy, and the emergency fund, which is ideally, or in an unfortunate situation, we would use it. However, it would also be one time. That is separate from the budget stabilization reserve, which is really for economics, for economic purposes. And so the current policy sets aside 4.5 million, or the target is 4.5 million for emergency and other one-time items that the council may want to pursue. The recommendation is to increase that by $2 million, the target by $2 million to $6.5 million. At 10% of the general fund operating expenditures, and to increase that each year based on the appropriations for the general fund. So by way of honoring the council's intent in 2013, I proposed the policy both increases the funding that was intended at that point, and also keeps up with spending over time. And then on top of that, we have the budget stabilization reserve, which is really intended to help ride out economic conditions.
And thank you for clarifying that, but a concern I would have then is that the first fund, not the budget stabilization, but the other fund, could become the council's slush fund then, if we're not clearly defining that this is intended for emergencies, for basically disasters that we need to address immediately, and it becomes a pot of money that then people start eyeing and saying, well, why don't you use that money? Why, we have a need that you're not meeting. Why don't you give us that money, spend that money on these, pet projects? And I'd really like to avoid that and make sure that if there is a policy that surrounds the use of those funds, that it be very clear that it's not, that it shouldn't be taken lightly and just used for pet projects along the way.
Through the chair. Yep. Absolutely. The use of either the contingency reserve or the budget stabilization reserve, and even the all of these reserves require an action of the City Council. The question about sort of losing sight of, if I could paraphrase, losing sight of the intent of the council for the contingency reserve, it does explicitly say that examples of the of uses of this fund is to be used for non-fiscal emergencies and disasters. So that's embedded in the policy for the contingency fund. Now, if the desire, or if the council so chooses to retitle contingency and provide perhaps an alternative title that reinforces the intent of this reserve, my recommendation would be that we not use the word emergency or disaster in that, because in the event of a disaster, we will be asked by our partners at higher levels in government to first spend our money before we spend theirs. And if we have a policy that says it's for emergencies and disasters, we run that risk. Now, it is a risk. It's not a guarantee, but if there is a desire to clarify the title, we can work on that.
Vice Mayor.
No worries. Thank you, and thank you for the report. The only real questions that I had on here had to do with the one-time revenue reserve, because I'll be honest, that was kind of a new one for me. Although after reading it, it makes sense. You need to have a place to put these funds that come in unexpectedly. And it says in the staff report that it excludes one-time community benefits, developer payments. What are some examples of these types of monies that have come in historically that would end up in a fund like this one?
Sure. Perhaps the most familiar would be ARPA. The ARPA funds were truly one time. They were intended for, initially, there were some very strict requirements on how the funds would be used. But then as the Department of Treasury loosened up those requirements and made it more accessible to cities, there really are no restrictions. So what we did is establish a separate fund called ARPA, and then program some of our expenditures through that fund. But that's one example. Another example includes if there is a one-time payment or a reconciliation of property taxes, it happens occasionally, then we would put those funds in the one-time revenue fund so that they don't get commingled and end up in the budgeting process in the future.
Got it. Okay, I appreciate the education. Thank you very much. And it certainly makes sense to not have a required minimum for that, since it really is just a place to put unexpected funds coming in. So I'm supportive of that, along with everything else. Thank you.
Other colleagues? Councilman Medina.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, CFO Pigueros. It's always wondered, like, when you just have these, when previously we had these set numbers, right? And it was like, okay, it's 3 million. Well, there's inflation. And I appreciate how these targets now are percentages of the general fund, which account for our growing general fund. And as we start dealing with over time as things get more expensive. So I appreciate all that work. Is there potential to have subsets in these proposed funds where you could kind of try to retain the intent of, like Councilman Salazar has stated, of that objective? I want to be able to see if that was something that you were comfortable with, or it's a recommended practice. Although I personally feel that I don't recall one time since I've been on the council that we eyed any of these funds. We go through the process each year with the recommended budget from the city manager, and I don't recall, other than maybe when we were dealing with COVID, where we were like really struggling to figure out where to cut. So fortunately then we had Measure G funds to kind of help us out there. So I know I'm rambling on a little bit here, but trying to, in these different funds, having a subset that kind of calls out that emergency component. What would, just kind of get your opinion on that?
Thank you. So if the policy under contingency reserve, it reads, and I think I mentioned this earlier, the goal is to maintain a balance of 10%, and it's intended to be used for non-fiscal emergencies and disasters. It's intended, perhaps could be strengthened to be a bit more restrictive, to speak specifically to disasters. That's one option, rather than changing the fund and the reserve name, making the application of the contingency reserve more limited, restrictive.
The city manager? Just 'cause
Certainly.
the mic got close.
I'm sorry, and I just want to echo what Nick is saying with regards to the use of the term disaster in your policies. You just want to acknowledge that, you know, when FEMA comes to help us out during that thing that may occur, they're going to look to us to spend your disaster money first, and we may not have to do that. He's not guaranteeing it, and he made that clear, and I'm not guaranteeing it and making it clear, but we can certainly do what we can to protect those funds to the extent possible so that FEMA can step in fully and do its work. That would just be a caution. I would echo what CFO Pigueros is saying, so.
Yeah, so-
Councilmember Salazar.
So when you were telling us your concerns there, Councilmember Salazar, they were making a lot of sense to me. And I was on board until we got to this argument about the labeling them as emergency funds. That's what makes me be more okay with it after hearing your concerns. It really looks to me that the danger of these funds being used as a slush fund you would have to have a pretty fiscally irresponsible majority on the council for that to happen. So like to be able to say, I'm taking my pet project and going into a contingency reserve that's pretty much earmarked for emergencies and those types of things. That would be pretty egregious. I do like the idea of maybe strengthening that language from intended to something else. Maybe we can look to our city attorney or to find a better adjective or a better verb for how to make that more clear. But yeah, I would want us to try to protect ourselves against the hopefully scenario that we won't face, but could face in the event of an emergency.
And I wouldn't say argument, I'd say discussion. The discussion we're having. Councilmember Salazar.
And so I definitely appreciate some of the explanation around, the naming and how that could impact us. But it seems like even though it's not in the title of the fund where we're saying what it's intended for, it still speaks of disaster and emergencies. So what's the difference?
Yeah, so whatever we title this fund will be a line on our financial statements in our committed and reserved fund classifications. So if it's contingency fund, it's not readily apparent. If someone decides to dive into the financial statements and read what is the contingency fund, they will see the definition that's in the policy before you this evening, the recommendation.
And I think that's a good enough assurance for me, because a lot of the times when we talk about contingencies, it's basically money that we intend to spend. We know something is going to go wrong in a project, and we're going to dip into the contingency. Happens every time. So that was really my concern. But as long as it's well defined in the policy, I think I'm okay with that. One sort of follow-up question when we start talking about one time, and that's always been an issue for me when we get to the setting a new budget. There's always money left over from the previous year, and it's never been clear up to this point where that money came from. How much of it is one time? How much of it is because we now have a new baseline for a certain tax line, and not knowing how those dollars are composed, it's hard to say how should we program them going forward, or should we use them at all? Should it be a one-time correction? And it sounds like you're moving in the direction of making that delineation clearer for us, which I definitely appreciate. One question I have for you is open positions. Open positions have traditionally been one of the biggest sources of those fund balances at the end of the year. How do those get classified within this structure?
Excellent question. So by and large, first to speak to the question of ensuring that our budgeting practices do not accidentally or inadvertently include a one-time revenue in our structural revenue discussion. I mean, that is an element that we are very, very sensitive to. I don't want to come back to you at Q2 to tell you that I'm sorry, when we prepared last year's budget, I thought that this was a recurring revenue, and it is not. So that is an area we pay very close attention to. To your point, the budgetary savings, when revenues exceed expenditures, it is very common for those to arise out of lower than budgeted expenditures. That reflects two elements. The first is conservative budgeting on the expenditure side. We want to make sure that what we budget, we have the resources to pay for in the current year, rather than having to come to the council after the fact to request use of reserves. That's not that's not the best practice. In this example, the example of budgetary savings from unfilled positions or unfilled authorized full-time equivalent employees, those monies would end up in unassigned fund balance. And that would be something that we would report on and at the beginning of the budget cycle and say, here are the accumulated unassigned fund balances that may be used. Of course, the policy speaks to using those funds for one-time expenditures, not recurring operational expenditures. And so that's how we would monitor both the revenue and the expenditure side.
Okay, all right. Yeah, and then my concern is that oftentimes on paper, it looks like, hey, here's money, why don't we add some positions? And that money is already technically spoken for. We didn't expend it because there was nobody to fill the position. But we end up getting in a situation where, we overcommit because on paper it looks like we have that money. I think we had the same situation with the ARPA funds where they're currently funding some FTE spots, but that money's going away. I think we got 2 more years on that?
Correct. That sounds about right. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And for me, as Councilmember Salazar articulated, and I know it's to increase to the 3.5 months, and I understand that. I mean, there's equipment reserves, right, that we have not been funding that is overdue. There's under the Public Works Department, those are monies that need to start getting back there again. Mm-hmm. And I think it is important to help, and Councilmember Salazar hit on the head, it's like, well, you have all this money. And there are many times that we've had it come up and say, well, why don't we use those one-time funds? So I really do want to distinguish, and I really wanted to understand it. I hear what you're saying about disaster emergency, get it. But at the same time, when we put it in place in 2013, I think it was just to ensure that we planned for a rainy day, a bad time, and et cetera, because we had experienced that. And I think we want to keep with that same concept. So I just want to remind us that it's important to kind of, once we set these thresholds, that we maintain them. These extras or these carryovers, they need to go back to replenish. We need to go back to the equipment reserve. It's been sitting there, and that needs to get replenished again. So, but thank you. Is there any other comments? Colleagues, there are no members of the public that wish to speak on this item. Is there any action, and thank you, CFO. Is there any action or motion from the body on this item?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Medina.
Yeah, I'd like to adopt a resolution rescinding resolution number 2013-11 and adopting a fund balance policy.
A second.
Motion Medina, Marty Medina, seconded Alvarez. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I'm hearing unanimous, 5-0. Thank you very much. I can see why you're not going too far. Thank you. Next item, please.
Item C, consider adoption of a resolution authorizing the purchase of police patrol vehicles with equipment installation and customization in an amount not to exceed $830,241 and waiving the competitive process for the purchase of such vehicles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Nick Pigueros, Chief Financial Officer. We're here this evening to request that the City Council take a action that it has previously taken by both authorizing the purchase of public safety vehicles and budget for the purchase in the amount of $830,241. And authorize the city manager to execute purchase agreements to acquire those vehicles. So just to quickly review the current vehicle acquisition process, there are multiple steps and iterations that we have employed here. The first is that staff, both working in our fleet as well as the user departments, will evaluate the status of the fleet, evaluate the thresholds that we put in place to ask the question whether or not it's time to replace a vehicle, such as mileage, wear and tear, operational costs to repair a vehicle, et cetera, depreciation. As part of the budget process, there will be recommendations that move forward to the city manager for vehicle replacement. Though not all of those will make the budget process, but to the extent that we have the resources available, they then come forward to the city council as part of a budget request. City council has the opportunity to review and provide direction on which, the level of budget requested for that. Staff then goes out and sources the vehicles, and if the total purchase of those vehicles is over $75,000, we come back to council to request contract award, and then the council either gives us the green light or we go back to the drawing board. Now, this process has worked well in the past. However, we are currently, over the last several years, council has authorized the purchase of 14 marked public safety patrol vehicles. Of those 14, we've only taken delivery of 5, which leaves 9 that are pending delivery. The chart here shows the vehicles that were authorized by council as well as the authorized budget. You'll see there are 4 dating back to 2021-22. And this most recent approval back in July for 23-24. Now, what we're experiencing and the reason we're here this evening is that the process that we've used has sort of been challenged by what we hear and what we see in the media through everyday activities. We're seeing that there's low vehicle supply. That's caused by order backlog, extraordinary demand, supply chain disruptions, as well as impact from labor negotiations. And what we're in right now, if we maintain the current practice, is that we're in a cycle. We just simply can't source the vehicles, bring it back to council to get authorization to award contract or to buy the vehicles and then purchase the vehicles. The reports that we're getting is that the minute the vehicle is available, for the most part, it's gone in almost immediately within a relatively short period of time. So the action tonight is to request, a recommendation is to request a temporary authority for the city manager. If approved, the temporary authority process would look would look like this. With council's approval this evening, city staff will source the police patrol vehicles and recommend purchase to the city manager. City manager will then evaluate the recommendation, considering the need and cost, and then if approved, the city manager would direct staff to execute the purchases. And then immediately following that, the council meeting immediately following that decision or that executive contract, we would report back to council about the purchase. You'll note here in the slide that purchases we have, whether it's singular or plural, we're not certain. We don't know exactly if we'll be able to buy multiple vehicles or if it will be one vehicle at a time. Again, I think the purpose here is to be able to react to market conditions that really render our current process unresponsive. So again, the requested action is to waive the bidding procedure for vehicles, as well as authorize the city manager to execute contract. We have here, of course, this evening, Police Chief Ryan Johansson, and I believe we have our fleet manager available on Zoom, should there be any questions. Thank you.
Thank you again for your report. I just want to, again, clarify that the monies that are stated on the agenda have already been appropriated and have been set. This is not a new request. This is not a last-minute thought. This is, again, monies. It is just about the way in which they're being purchased. My understanding is, and of course I know the chief's here, but this has been a concern for a couple of years, but now we're getting to a point that it needs to be addressed in real time. And the strike's probably not helping, and the lack of the resource. I think what I'm understanding too is that all options are going to be looked at, whether it's new, used, whether it's here or there. Can you get 5? Can you get 1 here? But it's a matter of being able to react quickly. I have spoken to the city manager, the police chief, and our fleet and facilities manager, trying to understand the complexity and understanding that truly it's an item that we're looking for, which I think I love that it has the dollar amount, it has a sunset, it's very specified to this department because of the need. What it's important to me is that we need to get some more vehicles to the city of San Bruno. We need to be able to have it so we have vehicles available for the patrol, that they're operational, and that, of course, the miles built up in the line of duty that they have. And so I want to make sure that we're doing the correct thing in that. So with that, I'll open up to my colleagues if there are any questions. Councilmember Salazar.
Typically, we do use a cooperative agreement for the purchase of these vehicles. So this would be going beyond any available cooperative agreements and looking just in the general open market. And I'm just wondering, how many other sources are out there that actually provide these specialized vehicles?
I don't know if the police chief has that answer, but I'm sure our fleet manager.
Chief, if you don't mind, please.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Ryan Johansson, your Chief of Police. I don't have a specific number of the other vendors that are available, but I can maybe give some examples of what we've been up against in the past couple of months. The reality is that the cooperative agreements we sign at the beginning of the year for a commitment that, say, Ford in this case will give us X number of vehicles. And then we really have no way of getting updates throughout the year until they suddenly tell us that our order's canceled because it's not going to be fulfilled. Because we order a relatively small number of cars, say compared to the California Highway Patrol or the Arizona State Police Department, I think that we get deprioritized. What has happened recently is that many of those larger contracts, in fact, this happened recently with the Arizona State Police, they have a contingency in their contract where if they don't need all of the cars they've agreed to purchase in their agreement, they can give some of them back. And those go back into the main supply line through a dealership. We do have a wonderful fleet manager here at the city who has inroads to that particular community and gets notified. So we found 5 cars recently in Arizona that were fully patrol rated and ready to go, with the exception of needing some paint changes for our preferences here in San Bruno. And over the course of time it took to begin drafting staff reports and resolutions and to come back to council, all 5 of them were gone within about 24 hours. And so that's sort of the mechanism through which many of these vehicles are making their way back into circulation. And because we're a smaller agency, we're just seeking the ability to pull the trigger more quickly so that they don't end up in the hands of somebody else.
Okay. And I support what's being proposed here tonight. I agree with the mayor that having the parameters around this to keep it very, very tight, definitely make it a safe bet, and we definitely want to make sure that we're agile enough to take advantage of these things. But looking forward, is there any potential that we could continually partner with the state or even a larger city so that we can always participate in their procurement and have that same opportunity for the larger purchases where they're getting prioritized? We could get prioritized along with them.
Yeah, we really have pulled out all the stops for 3 years now to try to figure out how to acquire these vehicles. And hopefully you can understand that myself, the Chief Financial Officer, would not be coming to you tonight if we weren't at the point of being in dire straits. We will quickly approach the point where we do not have enough patrol cars to respond to 911 calls. And so that's the position we found ourselves in, despite trying to partner in with larger agencies, despite trying to repurpose non-pursuit rated unmarked vehicles as pursuit vehicles, and despite, quite frankly, driving almost our entire fleet at this point well beyond its serviceable life according to policy, which brings with it a whole litany of other concerns. To put this into kind of scope for you, our entire fleet prior to this fiscal year consisted of 17 patrol vehicles. We're down 9. So we're talking about better than a 50% reduction of what's normally available to us just to respond to basic patrol calls for service. So in furtherance, moving forward into future years, this has been a change in how these cooperative purchasing agreements have worked for us in the past. Typically, it's essentially supposed to achieve what you've just articulated, that we are piggybacking on much larger state contracts, and as such are getting a better likelihood of obtaining vehicles and getting a competitive price in doing so. And we just can't get answers at this point from those fleet groups as to what exactly is going on. And the fear with this strike is that it's going to worsen the supply chain issues as well. So just know that we are also thinking outside the box in terms of makes and models. We're not being rigid with these needing to be our typical Ford Interceptors. We recently took delivery of an F-150 pursuit-rated vehicle, which quite frankly is not ideal for our urban environment, but nonetheless was what we could get our hands on, and that's the position we find ourselves in.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming up, because I had forgotten the fact of we're not ordering on a large scale. So therefore, in the real world, they're going to go with those that have the larger quantity. Other comments or questions? Okay. With that, I know there are no members of the public on this item, so it is a resolution. Is there any action by council? Vice Mayor.
I'd like to make a motion to consider adoption of a resolution authorizing the purchase of police patrol vehicles with equipment installation and customization in an amount not to exceed $830,241 and waiving the competitive process for the purchase of such vehicles.
Second.
Motion by Hamilton, seconded by Salazar. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Passes unanimous. Thank you all. Next, we'll move on to item 8, council committee report outs. And is there anything for, first of all, Vice Mayor?
So first up, well, I guess only up, the report from the Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency regular meeting on September 27th. Actually, this was, I should clarify, it was actually a special meeting. They had to move it to a different night. So it was a special meeting. So for my report out, our main reservoir of Hetch Hetchy is at 96% capacity, which is very high for this late in the year. Most of the state's reservoirs are in a similar state, and only a tiny fraction of the state has any level of measurable drought, so we're in really good shape that way. Year-to-date, precipitation is at 200%, and snow has already begun falling at Tuolumne Meadows, so we had a very short summertime, which is very good for our water levels. We discussed the ongoing scoping for the long-term reliable water supply 2045 plan. That scoping effort is expected to be completed in May 2024 with the intention to secure consulting services to develop the plan to begin in the new fiscal year that will start in July of 2024. And then we also met in closed session regarding some ongoing litigation and regarding the annual performance review for Bauska's CEO. We were supposed to also do the compensation portion for the CEO, but because it was a special meeting, we had to delay that because that can only be done at a regular meeting. And that's my report out.
For myself, on September 26th, I had being the chair of the ALS JPA, and I brought it up here before about the dispatching element through the ambulance that I serve as the chair, but also for the fire. Was invited down to the county to actually see the dispatch center that the county and how it operates from all the calls. Oddly enough, that day there, I don't think it was planned, but oddly enough, that day there were 2 dispatchers that were San Bruno residents. And so it was interesting to get an idea and have an understanding and see it firsthand. On October the 4th, SamTrans, we approved the scope of work for North Base, Building 200, which is like the administration. What that is, that's near around South City, kind of around the Costco area, just to kind of give you an idea, and it's needing repair. But the other element of that is a sea level rise, because it's kind of on a little bit of an island. And they talked about possibly applying for grant funding, which South San Francisco would be a major partner because of the benefits. But a tide gate maybe could benefit the city of San Bruno. At this point, listening to the meeting and being there, staff from the city of San Bruno had not been reached out to or contacted, and I've been assured they will be. But being on a regional board, sometimes you get those things ahead of time, and you can help assist. On October the 5th, I had a brief meeting with the new Department of Emergency Management Director. It was her first week in her new role as the vice chair. She met with me and the chair, Warren Slocum. On October the 5th, Caltrain hosted in San Francisco the electrification train. They've done one in San Jose. They did that now in San Francisco, which I attended. There was over 4,500 RSVPs to go see the train. It is amazing to see it, and there will be one in the county. In the county of San Mateo, probably a little south from here, and that will be at some point next year. And the Transportation Board did receive, on the 5th as well, grants from Caltrans and adding some Measure A funds to do some transportation planning. The money will help fund development designed to improve crossing and intersections for pedestrian, cyclists, and transit riders within a quarter mile of Highway 101. And that's it for myself. Without concluding 8, let's go to item 9, which is council member comments. And what we have first is 3 of us attended, and we're going to receive a report on the attendance of the annual League of California Cities Conference held in Sacramento. And that was held on September the 20th through the 22nd of this year. And we'll start off with Councilmember Medina, then we'll go to Vice Mayor Hamilton, then we'll go to this person called Mayor Rico Medina.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This year was the first time I went to the League of California Cities. First, I want to thank City Manager McIntyre for encouraging me to attend. It was primarily a bunch of different seminars and workshops to kind of go over like the hot topics that are being covered currently in our state. The ones that I attended were getting recertified for public service ethics laws and principles, navigating the new state housing laws, there were many, many new laws, adapting Main Street for a changing retail landscape, how to solve big city problems in small towns. And I found those all quite interesting. Nothing really fits for all of these. Each city's a little bit different, but it was still good to hear how other cities are kind of dealing with these problems. So I'll allow my colleagues who also attended to kind of give highlights of their favorite part.
Thank you.
Thank you. So this is my second time attending. Found it very, very valuable, as I did last year. In the opening keynote for the event, they focused on how to make what we do here in this room more accessible and meaningful for the public. The laws as written today, especially the Brown Act, can make it difficult for folks to feel heard. You come to a meeting, you stand up at public comment, and then are told thank you and receive no immediate feedback from council because we're prohibited by the Brown Act from engaging on items that aren't on the agenda. Now, the Brown Act's there for a reason, and I know why it's there, and it's important that it be there. But I'd still like to see see us get better at connecting with and following up with folks as soon as is practical, or even during the meeting as possible, to ensure that when our citizens come, make the effort to come here to engage with us, that they walk away knowing that they were heard and that we will be following up. And I've already begun discussions with our city manager on how we might do that. I attended sessions on building during economically troubling times like we're in today. This was especially timely given the number of fully entitled projects that are paused here in San Bruno. The key takeaway was that all the examples that they provided during that session were public-private partnerships, where cities partnered with commercial developers and affordable housing nonprofits and senior housing nonprofits and others to not only design a project, but push it through to completion. Another key takeaway was having the city envision what you're looking for and then putting that information out, and which was pretty much exactly what we did for Tanforan. So it was nice to see us leading by example in that regard. We heard some tips on how to potentially leverage our banking practices to encourage local financial institutions to offer local business loans to help our merchants. Overall, it was a rewarding experience, and I appreciate these opportunities to learn from our peers across the state who are facing all the same problems that we do, and learning from experts so that I can become a better public servant. Thank you.
Thank you. For myself, also, along with the Vice Mayor and the council member, attended the AB 1234, which is the ethics and principles. Attended fees, you got them, how do they work today? Interestingly, they did talk about credit card fees and how they did some surveys and separated. I think what staff had said, do you do them all? Do you do partial? And why are you doing one and not the other? So that was, since we've been talking about that. Also, there was the keynote speakers that were articulated. There was also a vendor expo. I also attended the case study response to homeless in a city, and unfortunately, the city took a very proactive approach, and they admitted as they sat up there, it took a lot of money, a lot of resources from staff and from the community. Also, what the bleep, public comment. That was not exactly what you think, but it was just the fact of what it was going on, and this is before all the Zoom situations that have been occurring. Hearing from some of the other, this is through the state of California that attended, hearing some of the things that had occurred within theirs and some of the policies and that they've had to put down. I mean, even from you will be fully clothed to speak before the city council. There's a policy because it happened. And so it was interesting to hear from the other electeds and some of the unique situations that they've had. And then increasing collaboration between local government and utilities on installing infrastructure. Thought that was timely, and to hear about that, and also after the storm, lessons learned. And that was primarily the big storm hearing. And I know we had it bad here, and listening to some of the other communities and the keynote speakers and the moderators, it was so significantly. And then just what they would have done in hindsight, how they would have changed it had you had that crystal ball. Also prevention training for supervisor and elected officials. There was also Peninsula Division Breakfast, which is our region, our county, and Santa Clara that we attended as well. What I did also while I was there on the first day, you have a lunch on your own. What I did is I took that opportunity, Embark, which is the applicant who was before us, who was awarded the next phase in which to begin the process. They had their office, their main office in Sacramento. So I took that opportunity and bought my own Diet Coke. That was my lunch, went up and sat with the couple that was before us who made the presentation, and to see their office and the works. It was my first time to get to talk to them, so that was a good utilization of being up there. Also, what I did do is the recruiter that recruited for the city manager's position, I spoke to her. The person who recruited for our CFO, I spoke to her. I had that opportunity at a point because I wanted to hear, what did the council do right? What could we have done better? How was the brochure? What worked? What didn't? And what are the trends that they see? We spend a good amount of money on recruiters to do those jobs, so I wanted to kind of get kind of, let's say, have an exit interview, shall we say, and what the value is, and are we having the right people doing the right jobs, and what do they see coming forward. But with that, as both my colleagues said, the ability just to speak to folks from other jurisdictions, and it's a small world that I sat next to somebody from Fort Bragg who knew Connie Jackson. They lived very close when she lived up there. I mean, what a small world. So with that, it was well worth it, and I want to thank our city manager who also attended, and I want to thank Councilmember Medina and Vice Mayor Hamilton, because obviously it is taking people out during the business week to do that, but thank you for that. Let's see if there are other council comments. Mr. Medina, please.
I was going to leave up cappuccino football. Pretty.
No, please.
But no, you have way more knowledge, but that was it. Undefeated going into this week.
I don't want to jinx it.
There's no such thing as a jinx, you know. Good talent beats good talent. So that's all I was really going to say, Mr. Mayor.
No, but
Very exciting.
it is. If none. And I will tell you, when I went to, last 2 weeks ago, I said that I went to Cappuccino because I gave that to the challenge about go see the schools. And so when I did go to Cap 2 weeks ago and I was at lunch, I was talking to some of the football players, and they are feeling, they committed to me, and they told me I don't have to worry too much about the wager I have to make with the Millbrae Mayor. They're feeling very confident, but then I just reminded them, until it's over, it's not over. But yes, they were very proud of themselves, and they've been doing much better, as you said, as well. For myself, on 9/26, went to Tanforan Cinemax and met the general counsel of Tonga, and also met the main actor in the movie Red, White, and Brass, where they were having a free showing at the mall that was put on by various sponsors. I spoke and welcomed JP as he goes by, who's an actor. He said he's never met a mayor. I said, well, I've never met an actor, so we had something in common. Gave the audience a welcome and gave a certificate of recognition to JP. And as I reported 2 weeks ago when I challenged my colleagues at the high school district when we went to the meeting to continue to visit the schools, this last week I went to Parkside Junior High during the 7th and 8th grade lunch and spoke to the students. Ben, who was on the delegation, was there, so we were able to talk. I was able to meet the students and see some of the progress they're having in the multi-purpose room. And then I also stayed to watch the dismissal of 6th, 7th, and 8th and the shall we say, the flow of traffic that occurs. So that was interesting. And then this last Sunday, I was asked, and I attended the St. Bruno's annual festival, where I spoke and met some of all the folks there, and the cultural diverse parish that they have is very impressive. And then I found out that through the San Bruno Police Department, that there's a plaque I have a picture of for the Camaro's selection for first place in the Public Relations Volunteer Recruitment Explorer CSO or Cadet Emergency Vehicle class. So this is something that's put on. It was in it's with Menlo Park and Ridding. Did I say that right? Ripon. And so that's where that vehicle went, and they were awarded first place. So congratulations for that, and thank you for staff and the team, because obviously that was Saturday. So with that, that's it for me. If there is nothing else, then we're going to adjourn this meeting just before 8:30. Staff, team, colleagues, thank you very much. This meeting will be adjourned to the next regular city council meeting, which will be held on October 24th at 7 p.m. Meeting adjourned.